Well, at least that's one thing we can throw away. That's the first thing I thought when I pulled the 17-year-old calendar out of one of the moving boxes. After a chaotic last-minute move, maybe the most poorly planned move in the history of moves, we finally started to unpack. In one box, I came across the calendar. Why did we keep a 17-year-old calendar? It's probably just tucked away, forgotten in a drawer years ago. I threw it into the garbage pile, and then, as tends to happen when I'm going through stuff to throw out, I took a break and I sat down. I started to leaf through the calendar. Doctor's appointments, dinner plans with friends, birthdays, the usual stuff you find in calendars. Written down on September 7th, I saw this note. Meeting at County USC. Baby? My wife Victoria and I got married in our late 30s. Kind of late for starting a family, but then again, not that unusual. I had always dreamt about being a dad. I'm a diehard White Sox fan, and I dreamt about playing catch with my son in our backyard and taking him to Sox games. Then I thought, what if it's a girl? Maybe she'd be a lefty or bat from the right side. Dreams change. We began to start a family, the natural, old-fashioned way, expecting to be expecting in pretty short order. But the old-fashioned way wasn't working. After about a year of trying, we decided that adoption would be our path to a family. We registered with Westside Children's Center to adopt through the county's Forced to Adopt program. They conducted a home study where a social worker visited our residence several times and interviewed us to see if we were suitable to adopt and if our home was safe to raise a child. We were approved, and then we waited, and waited, and waited. About a year after, they called us with a placement. Both parents had schizophrenia. We called my doctor, brother, and sister-in-law, and they told us that there was a pretty high likelihood that the child would develop schizophrenia. So we decided to keep waiting. Then we got a call about a baby who had been taken away from his foster mother because she had a drinking problem. If we wanted him, we had to decide in the next 2 hours. Oh, and his foster mother was a celebrity and would be fighting to regain custody with her army of lawyers. Because we were a couple of broke, struggling actors, we decided this was a battle we weren't prepared for. And then, there was the baby that we were getting ready to leave to pick up, car seat installed, when the social worker called just to confirm that we were both fluent Spanish speakers, which we weren't, which they knew. So discouraged, we decided to take a break. It was just after the Labor Day weekend, and we took a trip to Big Bear to get away. This was pre-cell phone days, so if you wanted to escape from everything, you actually could. Remember those days? We were up there for a couple of hours when the insecure, anxiety-riddled actor that I am had to call home to check messages in case I might have gotten a call from my agent. Well, no one was begging me to be in their movie. But there was a call from a social worker. There was a baby who urgently needed a home. If interested, we had to call ASAP. We called. The baby was a preemie, born at 28 weeks, and relinquished by the birth mom on the day of his birth. We arrived the next morning at Women's and Children's Hospital. We were met by our social worker, a doctor, and a couple of nurses. For about an hour, they discussed the history of this baby. He was born in county jail. He did not breathe for the first 20 minutes of his life. He was born cold, so an experimental warming procedure was performed to save his life. We were told that many of these babies, if they don't bond with someone, they will not live long. They call it failure to thrive. They told us he was at risk for many complications, but at this time it was just too early to tell what those might be. Our social worker told us another couple actually had been scheduled to adopt him, but at the last minute they decided not to. After sharing all this, they asked us, "Do you still want to see him?" Victoria and I looked at each other, and then I think we said together, "Yes." We were ushered into the NICU, which is the neonatal intensive care unit. It's a room filled with blinking lights and beeping sounds of incubators and other machines of medicine. When they pointed out the baby, our social worker, Jody, let out an audible gasp. The baby had a breathing tube and an IV and a splint on his tiny arm to hold the IV in place, and various other wires attached from his tiny body to the blinking, beeping machines. Victoria had this most loving smile on her face. I remember her simply saying, "He's beautiful." I don't remember saying anything at the time. They told us to think about it, that we would have to decide by Monday. This was Friday. And I don't remember what Victoria and I said to each other that night, but we both agreed that we would come back the next day. So the next morning we arrived at the NICU, and the nurse asked Victoria if she would like to hold the baby. She said yes, and this tiny, fragile being was placed in her arms. Victoria looked down at him, and her smile seemed to fill that beeping, blinking NICU with pure sunshine. The nurse then asked if I would like to hold him. I hesitated for a couple of seconds and then said, "Okay." This tiny human with the wires and tubes attached was gently placed into my arms. I looked down at him, and he looked up at me, and I melted. I was in love. 6 years after Victoria and I said yes to each other, we both said yes to our baby boy, Max Taylor Rosen. Now, back to that calendar I found, Medina County, USC. Baby, yep, that was Max. 3 days later, the calendar note said, "Official word, Max is ours." That was the date the county officially approved us to adopt Max. The date was September 10th, 2001, the day our world changed forever. The next day, September 11th, the world would change for everyone else. Almost 17 years have passed since that day. There have been and continue to be many challenges. Max is orthopedically impaired, which means he doesn't walk on his own. He's nonverbal. The only sound he actually makes is laughter, which if you have to make a choice, that's a pretty good one. He is developmentally disabled, has global brain damage and cerebral palsy, due in part to the lack of oxygen at birth and prenatal exposure to drugs and alcohol. Max's records, his medical records for the first 4 months of his life, fill 3 filing cabinets. The lessons Max has taught me and continues to teach me every day could easily fill more. He has taught me patience and appreciation for so much I take for granted. And that if he could survive and thrive, that anything is possible. He has taught me the healing powers of unconditional love. Life has not been easy for any of us. I now dream that one day Max will look up at me, smile, and say, "Hi, Papa." Dreams change.